So today, I'd like to talk a little bit about Jackie Chan. I've been a fan of his for off and on for a little over 20 years, and I've I haven't seen every single one of his movies, but I've seen quite a few of them. And let me talk about, just to start off, for example, just even in his character in the animated movie series Kung Fu Panda, which I'm sure most people have either seen or have heard of, which is all animated, of course, but he's one of the voices along with, some other people, very talented people, obviously. But his character is a monkey. And it's very interesting. When that came out, I remembered back when I read his book. He wrote a book back in the late 90s called I Am Jackie Chan, and I read it. It was about his life story up to that point, because he's had a very, even before he got into movies, he had a very fascinating life. And I learned through reading that book that he was called the monkey. So, and I've learned that back in the early 2000s, late 90s. So fast forward to Kung Fu Panda, which I guess came out in what, 2010 or 11, something like that. And I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. They used to call him the monkey when he was in Chinese opera school. Which, of course, the opera, if you may be familiar with this already, but just in case you're not, Chinese opera is not really what we think of over here as Western opera. It's a combination of, there is singing, but it's a combination of dance and acrobatics, and obviously, martial arts comes into it. Um, and that's what he was trained to do for a long time. So if you look at some of his really, really, really early work, like the first, not the first movies he made, but like maybe like the first few years he was making movies, or in the late 70s, I should say, he did a couple movies, one called Snake and Eagle's Shadow, and another one called Fearless Hyena. And even in those titles, you can hear the snake or the eagle or the hyena. Those are all very different animals. And in some of those movies, and there's probably a couple other movies, I'm not thinking of the titles right now, but there's actual like clips of him training where with, in the story it's relevant, of course, you're watching it and it makes sense once you watch the movie. But eventually what happens usually is one of the characters says, well, you have to learn this style of the hyena, or you have to learn this style of Snake and Eagle's Shadow. And he shows through his bodily movements, what that looks like in the martial arts. Of course, this isn't something that he invented. It's been around for a long, long time. But it's a nice pop culture reference, and actually you can find some of these clips on YouTube. If I can find them, I'll try to put them in the description of, because there's many. I mean, you could watch another clip. In fact, let me mention another person. Obviously, Bruce Lee is very famous, but he's more associated with the dragon. And there's a clip from one of his movies, which has several titles, but one of the titles I know it by is Return of the Dragon. It was the movie that he wrote and produced and directed himself. I think another title for it is The Way of the Dragon. Long story short, it's the one where he goes to, I think it's Thailand, and he tries to help this friend with her restaurant, and there's some trouble with gangs and gangsters and stuff like that. And there's this scene that's really great where he has to use Chinese boxing, and when he shows everybody the Chinese boxing form that he's going to do in real life, in the scene, obviously he's doing it to try and defend these people from being beaten up. He says out loud what each position is. Dragon whips his tail, and it's really fascinating to watch this as it's happening in the movie scene. So if I can find that one too, I'll try and put that in the clips. So why am I talking about Kung Fu people? Well, the first example with Jackie Chan movies, the reason I brought up the monkey story is because the monkey is not the king of the jungle. The monkey is very quick and agile, and he can escape out of situations using agility or acrobatics. And I think this is important to consider when you're thinking about your animal spirit, or you're thinking about maybe trying to get to know an animal spirit. There could be a whole variety of different animal spirits that might appeal to you. The tendency in a lot of, I'll just say in the culture I'm in right now, is to want to always go after the biggest, strongest thing. And sometimes that's a good idea. But just try to open your mind up to the possibility that in addition to the biggest, strongest animal, the lion or the jaguar or the dragon, there's these other animals too, like monkeys and butterflies. For example, I wanted to talk about various different examples in the past, obviously, but also we still have these animals with us, thank goodness. But for example, in the Mesoamerican culture, the butterfly is very highly revered, so much so that it's carved into the walls of Chichen Itza, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. So that certainly says something. There's also in Carr, which is a place you may be familiar with. It's a Mesolithic site in Yorkshire, England. So we're talking about maybe 9,000 BC. And they have the the deer antler headdresses that were used for hunting and ritual activities. We can dare say their form of shamanism, animism, etc. And by the way, you can check that out at www.starcarr.com. And I love using that example because that's a European, British Isles example of animal worship that's involved with ritual activities, which disproves the theory that people from Europe and Northern Europe and the British Isles, shouldn't have access to animal spirits. Just something I've heard in various circles, which I think is it's ridiculous. But again, I wanted to bring up these martial arts actors, pop culture references, because in particular, in the case of Jackie Chan, he demonstrates these mannerisms of merging on a physical level with an animal spirit. Now this is different than merging on a shamanic level, but it's more accessible. You can see it on video. It's something where you can really, at least experience some way of visualizing that animal pattern, so that you can have something to refer to. Another example of a smaller animal, for example, I see this quality of agility in squirrels in real life when I take my walks. I'm sure a lot of you, grew up with squirrels, and squirrels are very interesting because I didn't really think much of them growing up. I just thought they were kind of there and just running around, scampering up and down trees. And now when I go for walks, especially if I try to get into a kind of a medicine walk space where I'm trying to commune with nature, which is kind of a change in consciousness while you're walking, the squirrel showing up can mean a couple different things, and there's a lot of different people who could probably talk about different animal, totemism and divination, and those things are really interesting. I'm just going to tell you what I think it is for when it shows up for me, is the squirrel tends to remind me, oh yeah, I need to laugh a little bit. I need to, like, make sure I'm not so serious about everything all the time. Because sometimes when I see these squirrels, maybe it's just the ones in my neighborhood, but they're always having a good time. And they're working, they're going up and down and trying to get their nuts together, and, you know, I'm sure they're looking for things to eat. But they're doing it in a way that's really fun. And so, and the other message that sometimes I feel like they're giving me is, and anyone else who chooses to, um, you know, look at them and see what they're all about, is they're kind of like a connecting messenger between, let's say, the trees or the another area in nature that maybe isn't so, like, there's always areas thankfully in our region that I can't get to, and that's a good thing because we always need wild areas. And I always get the feeling that squirrels could be the kind of animal that could kind of go into those wild areas, whatever's left of them in in our town, um, and kind of bring that kind of essence out into the neighborhood between the trees and various bodies of water. We have a small pond up close to where I live, and then I'm thankfully very close to a larger body of water as well. So I kind of look at squirrels that way too. And butterflies, the same thing. Butterflies are just on a different plane because they're, not on the ground. And I think sometimes they have a very similar messenger type quality as well as a warrior type quality, which I kind of mentioned with the Chichen Itza reference. So I'm kind of mentioning various different places and cultures, a little bit of a pop culture reference, which also ties into a very ancient animal symbolism tradition in Asian culture, going back thousands of years, of course. Then I talked about a little bit about that Mesolithic place in Yorkshire, and then, the very ancient butterfly being carved in the Mesoamerica. Just as different types of animals that are so important that they're still with us today in some way, shape, or form, whether it's on a physical plane or on a stone wall or in a kung fu movie. These are spirits assigned to each of these animals that are communicating with us and hoping for us to engage with them in a way that is beneficial to creating a more harmonious planet. So you don't have to go to these places, although it helps. I'm sure, people have been to Chichen Itza or visited China or visited Yorkshire or whatever. Or you don't have to become a martial artist to reclaim and forge a relationship once forgotten with your own animal spirit. And this is where I'm here to help with my upcoming class, Getting to Know Your Animal Spirit Family. And this will be a class which will include a guided shamanic journey where you will meet your own personal animal spirit, which will be different for each person, so that you can really experience what that feels like for you in a way that's very gentle and at a pace that's good for you. With this class also, it'll be a Zoom class. You'll also get a 20 plus page PDF booklet with journal prompts and frequently asked questions that I've gotten over the years. And it also has a written form of the class. And you'll also be able to ask me questions, as there will be a dedicated Facebook group for the class. But it is coming soon. And I encourage you, if you're interested in this, really wanting to get in touch with your animal spirit, to sign up at my Linktree page, which is www.linktr.ee/now moment journey, which is the name of this podcast. I'll put it in the description below. And that way you can be on my mailing list, and I can. And I also have and co-founded a Patreon called Shamanic Earth Medicine. And this is where myself and Marissa Lovett teach about a lot of different topics, but mostly centering around animism and shamanism. This includes shamanic journeying. I just did a talk last week about weather and sacred tobacco and how you can start to work in a very respectful way with weather, using, I should say, engaging with sacred tobacco in a very respectful way. We also talk about other heathenry and pagan spirituality topics, plant spirit medicine, animal spirit medicine, and there will be my next class after this one will be a stone spirit class. But the Patreon, if you'd like to join us, we have several different tiers. You can join at $1 a month. You can join at $5 a month, which will give you the videos as well as you'll be able to participate in a monthly Zoom ceremony. This past month, Marissa did a despacho from the Andean tradition, a despacho ceremony, which was really gorgeous. It's a picture of it is on both mine and her Instagram pages if you want to check those out. And then at the $15 per month, you get the aforementioned benefits, plus you get deep discounts to Marissa's classes, as well as an intuitive reading where you can ask one of us, our helping spirits, a question on your behalf. So, check out the description in today's episode. If you want to also check out my YouTube channel, I've got a lot of free videos there about, a couple in particular about animal spirits, or animals in general. One I did a couple years ago called Getting to Know Ellen of the Ways, which is the deer spirit, the ancient deer spirit in the British Isles, and that is on my YouTube channel, as well as this past solstice, I did a talk on the bear spirit, which talked about the ancient, both folklore and traditional examples of bear, shall I say, ritual and symbolism on an animistic type vein, basically. But there's several other videos on there as well. Some on sacred tobacco, animism, a couple on the animal spirit class as well. So, I encourage you to check that out. And until next time, blessings to you.